Welcome back to Church of the Rock's Expedited Audio Training. In session 2, we learned about sound systems and troubleshooting, and I really hope you enjoyed our hands-on training session and got a bit of a feel for sound systems setup. And so now in session 3, we're going to be learning about how to do an effective sound check. You know, sound checking is one of the things that you can do really well, and it can show that you are worshiping God because you're serving the band and you're trying to make sure they sound the best. And also because you're getting there like an hour before the band. And for me, myself, I'm not a morning person, so doing an extra hour early is only for the Lord, seriously. But since the sound check really is for our sake and not the band's, we really need to be the ones who are leading it and do it in a way that's still friendly and helpful. So this session is going to show you how to do all those things. So enjoy the video and please complete all the questions. Let's get started. Today we're talking about something really important. We're talking about sound check. Now, every church and every situation that has a band should really do a sound check. It's really critical. Even if it has to be done really quickly at some of the mobile campuses, it still is really worthwhile being done. It helps you get everything set so that you know what you're working with. It really helps you make sure problems don't happen. And then also it's really important in developing a relationship with the band if it's done well. I'm going to be doing most of this session on an M7CL, but the concepts all apply to the Yamaha TF5 or any mixing board. I'm going over sound checking concepts. So I think that's going to be really helpful for anybody using any kind of mixing board. You know, there's 3 main parts to a good sound check. Something I call a system check, the sound check itself, and then the rehearsal. So a system check is when you get there early, way before the band. This is where the expression, you know, first in, last out comes in. At Church of the Rock, for the most part, we get there an hour or 45 minutes at least before the band. And it's to do stuff like this. So stuff like firing up the sound system. So your front of house area needs to be fired up first. Then you put your antennas in place. You turn your speaker system on. You turn on your personal monitor system and make sure it's all working how it should. You make sure all your instruments are connected and working and sounding their best. You make sure the microphones have batteries and the packs have batteries. You check your pastor's mics. So you turn it on. There's a more thorough check we'll talk about later, but check, check, check. Hey, hey, hey. There we go. Looks good. You do pre-service playlists, make sure your music rolls when you're playing. You make sure that there's audio coming from any video that might be happening during the service. And then if there's any other audio techs, you make sure that they have what they need. So that's what I would call a system check, and you make sure the whole thing is working. Then you actually get to the sound check. And one of the biggest crucial parts of a sound check is good communication. The way you communicate with the band is really important. So I always emphasize, you know, just use your common courtesies like please and thank yous. And also you're trying to build a genuine relationship with people. So ask them how they're doing, get to know people. It's a good thing to do. And another important factor is that sound check is the sound person's job to lead. This is not, you can't wait for the band to tell you that they're ready to sound check. We have to kind of take the initiative. So then as people arrive, because they always arrive at different times, you take the initiative that as soon as they look ready, or even if they're not fully ready, you ask them if they're ready to sound check. Sound check needs to include 4 main things. One is making sure the sound source is set up at its best, and that's kind of actually part of the system check. And we talked about it in the first section, but that's an important part of a sound check. Then you want to set your gain structure, making sure everything is gained correctly. We'll go over that more in a little bit. You want to roughly set your EQ and compression, and then you want to build a rough monitor mix. So, like I said, the first thing you want to do is make sure your sound source sounds the best it can. And the way to do that is always start back at the source. You always want to make sure, you have the instrument itself that's set up well. So I'll use the example, let's say, of an electric guitar. So the guitar itself, you want to make sure the knobs are in their correct place, that their amp has the correct setting, or if they're using a pedal board, that all has the correct settings, that the microphones are on the right place on the guitar amp, and then good gain structure on the mixing board, and then EQ and compression and such things. So again, it's not the opposite order. You don't start with EQ and compression. You don't start at the mixing board. You start at the source and work your way towards the mixing board. You'll always get a better sound that way. So speaking of gain structure, some people think of this as a very complex topic, and to some degree it is, but the main idea is rather simple. Basically, anytime you have multiple devices connected to each other that could have their own gain or volume or sensitivity setting, you want to make sure that they're all in their correct ranges so that they sound their best. When they're set wrong, you get things like distortion or noise. So there's a much more thorough explanation of all this in the manual, so make sure you check that out. But this is the main basics of what you want to get right. In practice, when you're doing a sound check, you're going to be looking for things like mic sensitivity, instrument volume, the different settings on your DI boxes, your head amp gain, your signal processing gain, which means like extra level that could be added or taken away at an EQ or a compressor, the fader position, and then like a bus, group, or master fader position. Those things all are what basically ties into a good gain structure during a sound check. And so once you've got all of that in place, and this of course happens a lot faster than it sounds here. Quite often these things are set and they're already pretty good from previous sessions, but you really have to make sure you know what these things are doing and what they're all about. The next thing I do when I do a sound check is I do a rough EQ and compression. So you're not going to spend a lot of time doing this, you're just trying to make sure that it sounds close to correct, and you're going to tweak this more in the rehearsal, which we'll talk about in a second. So you don't want to keep musicians waiting, so do this fairly quickly. And then after that, we're going to do a rough monitor levels. So we're going to do things like take a look at the board. You'll look on our board, you press a button, you see the whole mix for that one monitor, and you just generally make sure that they have the things they need to hear themselves well, have pitch references and rhythm references, all those kinds of things. And this all could happen in a matter of actually just a few minutes, if not for each individual person. And then you repeat this entire process for every single source, every piano, every vocalist, and every person who is playing on the stage of any kind of sound source whatsoever. All right, so we're going to put this all together. I'm going to demonstrate how a sound check goes. We have our worship leader, Derek Steele, with us, helping us out today. And we're going to pretend that Derek was the first person to show up at the sound check, and I'm going to get him a sound check. So I'm going to first of all say hi to him and be polite and say all kinds of nice things, that kind of thing. Hey, Derek, how you doing?
Hi, Isaac. Doing good.
So I'd love to sound check you if you're ready. Can I start with your piano, please?
You bet.
And this is going to go a little slower than normal because I want to demonstrate the different parts of it. So I'll get him to start playing piano. And then what I'll do is I will cue up his channels so I can see the gain coming in the board. I want to see around minus 12 decibels, so that's just a little bit on the hot side. So I'll take the head amp and turn that down just a couple notches. There we go, that's basically perfect. In this case, I had this already pushed up in the fader because just the way we're recording this video, but normally you wouldn't have that fader up, you would wait and then push it in at that point. And then what I would do is go to his monitor. In this case, we're using monitor 5. Actually, before I do that, I would do a quick check of his EQ. It's a very minimal EQ. To me, it sounds, I think, roughly how it's supposed to sound, not too much low end, fairly clear. If I needed to, I'd make some small adjustments here, but for now, I think I'm good. Do a rough quick check of the compressor. And when he's playing quietly, there shouldn't be much compression, but if he hammers it, there should be some. So if he could play a bit harder for a second. There, that's all right. And so he's not compressing at all, so I'm just going to turn that down just a little touch. There we go. There we go. And we talk about that a lot further in other sessions. Then I'll do a quick check of his monitor. In this case, I press monitor 5 and see that there's a roughly most of the stuff he might need in a monitor. And then I will check with him quickly. I'll see how that sounds. So hey, Derek, how does that sound in your monitor so far?
Sounds great. Can hear myself just perfect.
All right, thank you. So that's good. So that's basically the sound check of the piano. So now I'm going to check his vocal. Now vocals are done a little bit differently. Notice how I mentioned that we wanted a minus 12 level for the piano. Vocals, because they need to warm up their voice, they don't want to damage their voice. They'll never quite start at full complete volume when they do a sound check, so we want to keep that in mind. So that when we will intentionally have their gain set a little bit lower when they start, because then as they warm up, they'll get louder and louder. So we'll do the whole same process with the vocals, but I'll try to now go at a full speed so you guys can see how that goes. And this sometimes comes with practice. It takes a while to get faster at this, but the idea is you don't want to keep the band people waiting too long. They want to get on with their rehearsal. So that's why you're not going to fine tune anything at this point. You're just going to get it done all roughly. So I'm going to do that with his vocals. So I'm going to start, you actually want them not just to say hi. You're not just checking that the mic is working. You're actually wanting it to sound its best. So you actually get them to sing something. And some people, if they're newer, have a bit of a hard time with that, but you just say, hey, it's all right. Doesn't matter. We're just trying to make sure it sounds its best, right? So, all right, Derek, can you sing for me, please?
All right, here goes.
So I'll cue it, get his rough level first.
And I will sing hallelujah.
It's a bit on the low side even for my settings, so I'm
Praise
going
to
to
the
gain
King
it up
of
just a little bit.
Kings. And my song rising up to ya. You are my everything.
So that's around -18, like I mentioned.
I will trust in you,
So then
my
I'll
God,
push his fader in so he can hear
as
himself a
you
bit
teach me
better.
how to walk in your
We hear it
way.
in our mix a little better.
And I will sing hallelujah.
I'll quickly check
No
this in his
matter what
monitor
comes
that it
my
sounds okay.
way.
And then I will, again, double
I
check
will sing
his
hallelujah.
EQ. Probably taking off a bit more
Praise
highs
to
than
the
it
King
needs.
of Kings.
And the
My
compressor
song
looks like
rising
it's
up
pretty good for what the volume is
to
now.
ya.
And then thank you.
You are my everything.
So that sounds good. How does it sound on your monitor so far?
It sounds great. If I could get just a hair more of my own voice in my monitor, that'd be great.
That sounds good. There you go. Can try that
And
again.
I will trust in you, my God. Yeah, we can back it off just a hair from that.
Okay.
As you teach me how to walk in your way. And that's great.
Okay, thank you. All right. So that's the basics of a sound check. And that's going to be the way you do that. And again, hopefully you get faster with this over time. And it's really important to just dial in your sounds, to do a full and thorough sound check and go through all those things really quickly. All right, so now we're going to talk about rehearsal. So rehearsal is really important. You know, the band's rehearsal is also the audio tech's rehearsal. One thing I like to think about is that if they're putting in the effort, we should do that as well. But also we want to get good at what we're doing, and just like any sport, any kind of other thing, we need to rehearse as well. And there's some critical things you can do during rehearsal which you can't do during sound check, and you also probably can't do, or usually can't do during a service. These are things like fine-tuning your EQ and compression levels, setting reverb levels, fine-tuning your monitor mixes, which we'll talk about more in a little bit, testing all your recorders, rehearsing your mix, and then creating scenes. So, you know, fine-tuning monitors is not quite as easy as it sounds. Some campuses now have had the ability to have a second person do monitors for them. We're calling that person an A2. And their whole job is to, you know, grab an iPad, use the app for the mixing board, and head up on stage to make adjustments for the band as they request them. And so we've only made a rough monitor mix when you first done your sound check, but then they get to go up and really tweak them for the band members. And they've really come to really enjoy this. If this isn't possible at your campus, you can still make all those adjustments on your mixing board or grab the iPad yourself and go up on stage. So I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to grab the iPad, head up on stage to help Derek out. So I'm up on stage here with Derek. I've got the iPad. It has the Stage Mix app where we can see all the different faders, and most of you guys are aware of this. And so to change his monitors, there's this thing called Sends on Fader, and we have him on monitor 5 today. Now normally with this piano player, he actually has a wedge on the ground he can control himself, but just for this example, we're using this. This will be more for the singers out front, and so you can change their monitors with them. The rest of the people usually in our setups can change their own monitors, but we're using this as an example today. So we did a rough monitor levels as we did our sound check, but now we want to fine tune it. So what we want to do is actually get in and hear what he's hearing. So in this case, the monitor is up in the sky, which you can't see, but so I'm actually going to get in and I'm going to get Derek to start playing and even singing if he would like.
And I will sing hallelujah.
So now I want to listen and I want to hear the mix myself so I can get an idea about what he might or might not like. And in my opinion, I think he could use a touch more piano, but then I'd ask him if there's a time in the rehearsal, hey, do you think you need more piano, or what would you like in your mix?
Yeah, a bit more piano would be perfect.
So then you go in and you find the channel. Here, for example, 9 to 16, it says keyboard, it's piano, and I give him just a little more, and then you listen for it. Now I can hear a bit more fuller up there. How's that, Derek?
That sounds great.
See, as simple as that. And again, when you're making these kind of adjustments, you want to make small adjustments so it doesn't wildly change dramatically, and always checking with the person. The people who've done the really best job of this have been people who have been more intuitive, again, anticipating. So they would listen and they'd say, well, I know that singers usually need a pitch reference, they usually need a rhythm reference. And if you can't hear any of those things, you can ask them, hey, do you think you need a bit more piano or bass? Do you need more maybe kick and snare? What else, Derek? What have you liked with the people doing monitors for you?
Well, like what you just said, I love it when the audio tech actually takes the initiative to set a bass level, and from then it's just usually a minor tweak, you know, maybe just the voice a tiny bit more or the instrument a bit less, so that, you know, 90% of the level is probably good to go, rather than starting from scratch where there's nothing and we have to kind of get it close and then fine tune it. It's great, and the audio techs are the best guys to get us to that 90% mark because they know how to listen for individual things and what to listen for.
That's perfect. All right, thanks. So that's, again, how you want to set a monitor. We want this to be, again, time where you're building a relationship with the person. You want this to be a time to help so they can hear what they can hear. And again, this is all so that we can worship God and make it easy as possible for the musicians to do their part. So I've already said that the band's rehearsal is the audio tech's rehearsal as well. And one of the big parts of that is rehearsing the mix itself. So you want to be able to create moments with your mix. The band is trying to do that themselves with what they're playing. There's parts of the songs that have high energy and lots of guitars and maybe big vocals, and there's parts where it drops down to like a single piano or something. And we want to be able to enhance that, to really add to that. Maybe we're adding in a nice tasteful reverb on those slower, quieter spots, or we make the whole mix sound fuller and bigger at those bigger spots. So you need to know when this happens in different parts of the song. Sometimes by missing it, even just by a few kind of milliseconds, is enough to make it sound just a little bit less good as it could have. You kind of lose a bit of the impact. So if you're anticipating in advance what's coming up, you can hit something so the moment they hit that part, it sounds great. And then you can pull down when it needs to. And so it's really important to do that as much as you can, to learn the songs, rehearse the mix. And I think that'll really go a long way to set you apart from kind of a decent mix to a really excellent mix. And I really want that for all of us. Another really important thing is creating scenes. So at the South Campus here, this is actually now a required part of our setup. It's something the band has come to expect. And creating scenes is really helpful to store all your settings on the board so that they come back later on. And so there's a couple scenarios where you'd want to use this. The one thing is if you have different lead singers, and another one is where you have a bunch of dramatic changes. So I'm just going to go through for you. If we have which we always do, different lead singers lead different songs, what I would do for that. So what I would do is I'd go on here, let's say for example, it's this red mic as the lead singer for song 1, but then it's going to be yellow for song 2. What I want to do is change in my DCAs who's in lead and who's in background. DCAs, again, if you remember from previous sessions, or groups where you have multiple things will change level by the way you change them. So if I have a lead vocal DCA, I want that to be whoever is lead. And if I have a background vocal DCA, I want that to be whoever is background. So the way you would change that is you would select the person, push in any knob, and you can see DCA here. 8 goes along with background vocal, so I'd take it out of 8, put it into 7. I'd go to who was lead, do the opposite, take them out of 7, put them into 8. And now these people have swapped in my DCAs who is in which. This would look a little different on the TF5 boards, but it's very much the exact same process. The second thing that we also would need to do is at, again, the South Campus, we have a personal monitoring system, and they have a lead and background vocal group on that personal monitor system as well. And they want that to change automatically for them when they change scenes as well. So the way you would change that in our board, there's a button here called lead vocal to ME1s, which is the name of our personal monitor system. You press that button. I would take the lead out of that, push in the person who is now leading, go to the background vocal to ME1s, take out that person who is now leading, and put in the former person leading into that background vocal mix. So now for the ME1s on stage and for the mixing board DCAs, the background and lead singers have swapped, so it's the correct person who's leading that song. Then to actually save the scene, use these scene memory and store and recall buttons. We've had the method of going up to scene number 10, which uses up arrow to go number 10, and then hit store. You would give it a name. I'll just call it Z for Derek Zielstra. Enter, hit OK. And now this is scene 10, Z, and it's going to be all those things we just changed. And of course, you would have whatever changes as well, including all of your monitor changes. This is where it's really good to communicate back if you have a monitor person to make sure that you're saving all of their changes. And to get in the service, then you would go use up and down arrows and hit recall to get back to those other scenes. And so it's really important to have some caution when you make scenes. You want to make sure you're not going to accidentally not save something or save over something. You can think about it as almost like a save or a save as on a computer. So if you are changing the number and hitting store, it's kind of like a save as. You're saving it as another file name. But if you don't change the number and just hit store, you're saving over. So if you want to save over, that's good. But if you didn't want to save over, you want to create a new scene, you've now kind of wrecked your last scene and lost it. So you have to be very thoughtful, very careful when making scenes. But by doing this and doing it well, you can also make sure the mix is correct for the very start of the song. So as soon as that song starts, the mix is set because you've saved it there. the monitors have changed for the singers, and you have the correct person in your DCAs. I think this is a very helpful thing, and I think it can help you a lot. For smaller campuses where you're not having a lot of different lead singers or there's not a lot of other changes or personal monitors, you could maybe get away without using scenes. This is kind of more optional for the other campuses, but South Campus, it's something we do every time. So this is, again, something you only would do during rehearsal, because there's no way you could pull it off during the service, and by then it's far too late. So, well, I hope this has really helped you guys. I really believe that doing a proper sound check is really critical to doing a really good mix. It includes a system check, the sound check itself, and a rehearsal. And I think you're going to get a much more excellent mix if you do all of these 3 steps, even if it's brief. So I thank you for joining me today. Hope you've been learning a lot of stuff through this course, and look forward to teaching you the rest of it. God bless. So sound checking is crucially important to a good mix, and it has 3 main parts to it. There's a system check, a sound check, and the rehearsal. You know, if you master the sound check, the worship team is going to think you're a pro. So now let's answer the questions below. And then in session 4, we're going to be training on how to use Yamaha digital mixing boards in pretty good detail. All right, hope you enjoy that.